This is Storytelling with Puppets, and the story this time is called Ask Mr. Bear. It's adapted from the classic picture book by Marjorie Flack. Telling this with puppets, it makes a really good puppet story for 2- and 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds as well. It's very simple and gentle. It's also a good, easy story to tell if you haven't used puppets that much. There's not a lot of fancy puppetry or voices or anything like that involved in it. So to tell it, you need a bear puppet. You also need a few farm animals. The book uses 5. I often tell it with 4, and this time we're just going to use 3 to give the idea. You need a few simple props to go along with the animals. So sheep has a blanket, and that can just be a scrap of material or something like that. It doesn't have to be exact or perfect. I don't actually use a puppet for the main character, who's Danny. Instead, I play the role of Danny, as well as narrator, and his mother too. So the story feels a little bit more like an oral tale, kind of an oral tale / puppet story. And you'll see how it goes. So here is Ask Mr. Bear. Once there was a boy named Danny, and one day Danny's mother had a birthday. But he couldn't think of what present to get her for her birthday. So he decided to go and see what he could find. So he walked along until he met, and here I'm reaching down into my puppet bag, and the kids are following that motion and waiting to see what comes out. Until he met, who did he meet? That's right, a sheep. So with this story, I'm really trying to encourage some audience participation as far as identifying the animals and giving their sounds. And what does the sheep say? That's right, bah. And Danny said, Mrs. Sheep, can you give me something for my mother's birthday? And Mrs. Sheep said, I can. You can use my wool and give her a blanket. And Danny said, thank you, Mrs. Sheep, but she already has a blanket. Well then, said Mrs. Sheep, see what else you can find. And you can see Sheep's voice there. It's nothing extreme or elaborate, just a little sheepy and a little different from Danny's is the main thing. See what else you can find. So Danny walked along until he met, and now the kids are looking again down in the puppet bag, waiting for that to pop up. And you can, if you're taking a little time getting that puppet on your hand, that's okay. It just adds to their anticipation. Until he met, who's that? That's right, a duck. And what does a duck say? And look at that, quack, quack. And Danny said, Mrs. Duck, do you have something you can give me for my mother's birthday? So as Danny here, you're sort of talking to the audience, but also to the puppet. So just like you would with a puppet, moving back and forth between audience eye contact and other puppet eye contact, you do that as a storyteller. Do you have something for my mother's birthday? And Mrs. Duck said, well, you could use my feathers and give her a pillow. Oh, that's a nice idea, said Danny, but my mother already has a pillow. Well then, see what else you can find. So Danny walked along, and you can see with the props that I'm getting from the puppets, I'm just putting them on my lap because I'm going to use those again at the end. The puppets themselves, the farm animals, I'm done with them, so they just go usually behind my puppet bag, which you can't see on camera, but it's back there. So the kids in front aren't tempted to get them, and they're just out of the way. So Danny walked along until he met, who did he meet? That's right, a cow. And what does the cow say? Moo. And Danny said, Mrs. Cow, do you have something I can give my mother for her birthday? And she said, well, yes, Danny, I can give you some milk, and you can give that to her. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Cow, said Danny, but my mother already has milk. Well then, you should ask Mr. Bear. Mr. Bear? Yes, he lives in the woods. Oh, well, will you come with me? And you can see now, as Danny, in character, that this is the moment where there's just a little bit of tension. It's sort of that 2-year-old storytelling tension, so not a lot, but it is a shift. So you want to show that as Danny, both in your voice, he's a little bit apprehensive, and in your body language. Instead of meeting people like this, he's holding back a little bit like that. Yes, he lives in the woods. Oh, will you come with me? No. Okay. So Danny went by himself, and he walked all the way to the woods, and there he met, who's that? That's right, that's Mr. Bear. And you know what Mr. Bear said? He said, "Rumble, rumble, rumble. Hello there, Danny." And Danny said, "Hello, Mr. Bear. Can you give me something for my mother's birthday?" And Mr. Bear said, "Well, Danny, I don't have anything to give you for your mother's birthday, but I can tell you something that you can give to her." So Danny went very close to Mr. Bear, and Mr. Bear whispered in his ear. "Psst, psst, 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 psst. Oh, thank you, Mr. Bear," said Danny. "That's a wonderful idea." So Danny ran all the way home until he got to his house, and he found his mother, and he said, "Guess what I have for your birthday?" And she tried to guess, and she said, "Is it milk?" And Danny said, "No, it isn't milk." And then she guessed, "Is it," what did she guess next? Yep, blanket? "No," said Danny, "it's not a blanket." And then she guessed, "Is it," that's right, a pillow. But Danny said, "No, it isn't a pillow." And Danny's mother could not guess what it was. So he gave it to her. He went right up to his mother and gave her a great big birthday bear hug. And that is the story of Ask Mr. Bear by Marjorie Flack. And that's one way to tell it, with puppets.